It was the kind of weather that unsettles you. A thick fog crawling over the old Alder Creek bridge as I made my way toward my new home. I had finally bought the small, weather-beaten farmhouse on the outskirts of a town in rural Vermont, desperate for a fresh start. The locals said old Mrs. Caldwell had lived there her entire life. She had passed away months ago, and the house had stood empty until I inherited it from a distant relative. I remember the heavy silence inside the house as I unlocked the rickety front door. As I moved through the cluttered living room with boxes of my belongings, I noticed the peeling wallpaper with faded floral patterns and a fireplace that hadn't been used in decades. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows. At night, the sound of that wind felt like whispers passing through the house. I chalked it up to old wood settling. But on my first night, as I lay in bed waiting for sleep, I heard something fall downstairs. It was a soft crash, like the sound of a small object hitting the hardwood floor. The hallway light flickered as I carefully descended the staircase. I saw nothing amiss at first. It was dark except for the faint moonlight through the curtained window, and every corner seemed to merge into shadows. Then I noticed something on the floor near the fireplace mantel. One of the small porcelain figurines I had placed on a shelf had been knocked to the ground. It lay face down, a crack running along its porcelain cheek. I didn't remember placing it there. My fingers brushed the broken piece nervously, and the hairs on my neck stood on end. I should have thought it was nothing, just a coincidence or bad luck. But we don't have a cat. My mind raced. I reminded myself, I just moved here. New house, new routine. My eyes scanned the living room for another possible cause, maybe a loose shelf or a gust of wind blowing in through a crack. But all windows were closed, and I still hadn't turned on the lights. I could barely see. A soft shuffling sound came from the hallway, as if someone was walking down the corridor. I froze in place, heart pounding. My first instinct was to leave, to run back upstairs and lock myself in. But something compelled me to stay and look. The temperature dropped suddenly, like a cold breath had blown through the room. My breath fogged in the chilly air. I peered into the hallway and saw nothing, just darkness and the gentle sway of curtains. A faint, barely audible whisper, or maybe it was the wind. I squinted, trying to discern any shape, but only the outline of old furniture and a family portrait on the wall met my eyes. In that frame was Mrs. Caldwell and a man I assumed to be her husband, standing side by side on a faraway summer day. He wore an oilskin coat, looking young and smiling as the camera caught him with her. I turned on the flashlight app on my phone and swept it slowly around the room. When the light fell on the front door, I realized it was wide open, even though I'd locked it behind me. My heart thudded. I was certain I had locked the door. It must have blown open from the wind, right? Or maybe not. A chill ran down my spine. I quickly shut the door and double-checked the locks. Safe. I snapped the light off, deciding sleep was more important than ghosts. Sleep, however, eluded me. Every creak and sigh of the house felt amplified. The strange dread in my stomach wouldn't calm. As dawn approached, exhausted, I dozed off in the old armchair by the window rather than in the bedroom. That's when I heard her voice clear as day, not a whisper, but a full sigh, right beside my ear. He's not gone. I jolted awake, breath catching in my throat. My head whipped around, but no one was there. Just me in the early morning light. For a few nights after that, nothing happened at all. I started to think I might be imagining things, that the stress of moving had me on edge. But the day after I heard the voice, I set out on a small hunt for explanations. In the attic, between boxes of dusty linens and old framed pictures, I discovered an old diary belonging to Mrs. Caldwell. Its leather cover was cracked, pages yellowed with age. Inside, she had written about evenings sitting by the window, waiting for him to come home. Her husband had been a fisherman who left early for sea each morning, always promising to return, but he didn't come back one stormy night years ago. She had written how every night after that, she'd gaze out at the raging river and whisper his name into the wind. Reading her words, I felt the house breathe around me as though the very walls exhaled this tragic story. The haunting was not for me. It was her loneliness and grief replaying itself in the empty rooms. That night, I decided to do something unusual. Instead of sleeping inside, I sat on the porch under the stars. The night was silent, except for the distant call of a loon on the water. The house behind me was still and peaceful. As I watched the creek glisten under the moonlight, I became aware of a figure in my peripheral vision. There, standing just beyond the porch railing, was the silhouette of a man. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. He looked like he belonged in another time, wearing an old oilskin coat, head down, as if scanning the river's edge. Then he turned slowly to face me. In his eyes, I saw something I couldn't quite identify. A deep, aching sorrow. He spoke, but it wasn't a voice. It was more like the creek's gurgle turned inside out, a sound on the edge of hearing. "I'm still here," it seemed to say. Then he was gone. The figure dissolved into the night as if he had never been there. The cool night air felt strangely warm on my face as I sat frozen on the porch. A distant howl of wind through the treetops felt like gentle tears falling. I realized Mrs. Caldwell had been right next to him that night, listening and waiting. For the first time, I didn't feel afraid. Instead, I felt connected to them, two souls entwined by that old river. I left the porch light on that night, and every night after, like a beacon for them. Inside, the house felt different, a little lighter, as if we finally weren't entirely alone. The house at Alder Creek had given me fear, but in the end, it gave me understanding. It started on a late September morning, with crisp air and golden light filtering through the evergreens of the Cascade Mountains. I was deep in the woods of British Columbia on a solo camping trip, chasing solitude in the hope that a week off-grid could fix something in my head. The forest felt alive around me. Mossy trunks were carpeted in green lichen, while the smell of pine and damp earth filled the air. My dog Growler padded beside me as I hiked along the narrow trail. He was a quiet companion and a comfort on the lonely road. I pitched my tent by a small creek bank after hiking miles. The world was quiet here, except for the rustle of leaves and the gurgle of the water. That first night, I slept like a log under the canvas of my tent. The next morning, I planned to hike to Bella Lake a few miles west. I filled my canteen from the creek's clear water, and as I knelt to scoop a drink, I noticed footprints on the soft mud near the water's edge. They looked human, not too deep. Someone had been here recently. Strange, I thought. The nearest road was an hour away, and I hadn't seen another soul since I arrived. My heart skipped a beat at the thought of a stranger wandering so far off trail, but I shrugged it off. Probably another camper who left early. Growler sniffed at the tracks, ears perked, but then trotted away as if they were nothing to worry about. By late afternoon, I reached Bella Lake, a glassy body of water nestled between ridges of fir and cedar. The trees were silent spectators around the shoreline. I set up camp in a grassy clearing, scarred by old burnt logs, then decided to take a swim. The water was frigid, but clear, reflecting pine trees like cathedral spires. I was alone, or so I thought. When I climbed out and hung my towel from a branch to dry, I noticed something odd on a nearby tree trunk. A blank patch of bark scraped clean of moss. Someone had removed it intentionally, I realized. I tried to ignore it. At dusk, I built a fire. The burning pine cones popped and crackled, shadows dancing between the trunks. I ate canned beans, warmed on the flame, and drank bitter coffee, fending off the sudden chill. A couple of airplanes went overhead, leaving faint white trails across the lavender sky. I even snapped a few photos of the twilight as the stars came out, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling in my gut. But as midnight came, something changed. I lay on my sleeping pad, listening to the forest. And every so often, the rustling of branches far beyond sounded like footsteps or dragging feet. I told myself it was an animal bear, or deer perhaps, but the sound was too deliberate, too close. Around 2 a.m., Growler shot upright and started barking ferociously. I bolted upright myself. The fire had almost died, and the tent flap rustled in a breeze I didn't feel. My heart pounded. Then I heard it, a faint whispering, like someone speaking just beyond the edge of the firelight. It was barely audible, like a breath turned into words. I froze, gripping my flashlight and petting Growler to calm him. "Hello?" I croaked into the darkness. No answer, just a shifting shadow among the trees. I whispered back, voice shaking. "Who's there?" The only answer was a snap of a twig. Alone again. Whatever was out there remained hidden, feeding off the darkness. Sleep was out of the question after that. I spent the rest of the night on edge, sitting by the weak fire, Growler by my feet, alert as ever. The moon broke through the clouds. Each time I thought I saw movement in the trees, I snapped on the flashlight and scanned, but always saw nothing. Once, I thought I saw a pair of eyes reflecting in the darkness a dozen feet away. When I flashed the beam on them, they vanished. My nerves were shredded. I even started sleeping in my clothes, half expecting to have to run. Finally, as the sky lightened, I packed up as fast as I could. Anxiety felt like a heavy stone in my chest. I debated leaving Bella Lake entirely, but I also needed to know what had been out there. I decided to hike out the other side of the lake, hoping the new trail would lead me back to civilization. As I trudged along the water's edge, something on a tree stopped me cold. Another carving, similar to the first. My breath caught. Beneath the crude symbol on the bark were letters etched deep in the wood. My fingers traced them, and my skin went cold. They were my own initials, but backwards, as if written by someone facing me. Before I could fully comprehend, I heard it again, right behind me, barely above a breath, the whisper, and distinctly, my name. I ran. Trees and branches whipped past. Growler yelped but ran beside me. My lungs burned and heart hammered in my ears as I pushed myself forward, not looking back. I didn't stop until the trees finally thinned. I don't remember exactly how I escaped the woods. All I know is I burst through the tree line hours later, still in shock, with Growler at my heels. The campfire, the carvings, the footprints, the forest, swallowed them back into silence. I still can't explain who or what was out there. That was the last campsite I ever pitched.
I moved into the old flat on Brick Lane the week after Christmas, hoping to leave my troubles behind in London. The building smelled of damp wood and boiled cabbage when I first arrived, but it was cheap rent near the bookstore where I planned to spend my days. The flat's one bedroom was cozy enough, with a narrow hallway leading to the small kitchen and living room. I remember the first night. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. I could just make out the silhouette of my next-door neighbor through a gap in the curtains of the flat across the hall. At first, I thought the tapping on the wall was just a leaky pipe or the neighbors settling in, but then it became more frequent. A gentle but distinct knock, 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 like tiny footsteps pacing back and forth in the night. My heart would leap each time, but I'd tell myself I was being silly and roll over. I didn't want to panic in an empty flat with nothing but unfamiliar noises. During the afternoons, I tried to distract myself by unpacking and making my flat feel like home, hanging up a few prints I had, arranging my books on the shelves to look tidy. A week in, I started coming home to find the pictures on my walls slightly askew, even though I had hung them perfectly straight the day before. Once, I found a bookmark I had inserted in a novel sitting on my desk, open to a blank page. It felt like a child's game, someone playing pranks from the shadows. I joked about it with a coworker at the bookshop, even showing him one of the photos that had fallen. He looked uneasy, telling me to get a change for the door and not to stay out so late. I hurried home before dark after that. That evening, I changed the locks on the front door, installing a new deadbolt. It gave me a brief moment of relief, but it didn't last. One night, after returning late from work, I noticed my front door chain was unlocked, even though I was sure I had locked it when I left. Panic knotted my stomach. I flipped on every light and searched the flat from top to bottom, but found nothing amiss. My hands trembled as I double-checked the chain, securing it tightly. I crawled into bed with the lights on, and eventually, the exhaustion took over. Paranoia crept into my thoughts. Every time I took a shower or left a window open to let in air, I had this nagging sense that I wasn't alone. My phone buzzing in my pocket would sometimes feel like it was in someone else's hand. I even started sleeping with the radio on all night long, the music a thin shield against the silence. But the noises in the walls didn't stop. Some nights they grew louder, like claws scraping behind the plaster. I even noticed fresh scratch marks on the wood floor in front of the bathroom door, as if someone had dragged a key or sharp object across it. Late one stormy night, I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the dark hallway. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, pacing just beyond my bedroom door. My breath caught in my throat. "Who's there?" I whispered, voice shaking. The footsteps stopped. All I heard was the rain tapping on the window and my own heart pounding. I flicked on the light and flung open my door. The hallway was empty. Goosebumps rose on my arms as I tiptoed out and checked every corner. The closet, under the bed, behind curtains. But there was no one there. My hands were clammy as I slid back under the covers, willing myself to sleep. Over the next few days, I could barely sleep. Every unfamiliar creak made me freeze. I even started sleeping fully dressed, as if at any moment I might have to run. The thought that someone had been living behind my walls, watching me day after day, shattered me. When dawn finally came, I gathered what little courage I had. The next morning, a deeper terror took hold. As if on instinct, I inspected every corner of the flat. Behind the loose floorboard in the hallway, I found a small camera lens staring back at me from the wood. My blood ran cold as I realized it had been pointed straight into my bedroom. I shook violently, fingers trembling as I traced the wires into the wall. A chill settled in my bones when I discovered there were multiple hidden lenses in walls and ceilings throughout the apartment. The living room, the tiny kitchen, even the hallway, closet. In each place, I found a small camera lens and a bundle of wires. My entire life had been captured in those lenses without my knowing. I left Brick Lane the very next morning, carrying just a backpack and my suitcase. My landlord acted shocked when I confronted him and quickly changed the locks himself, insisting he would investigate. But I felt exposed and broken, knowing how deeply violated I had been. 4 months after, I avoided that street. I took a new apartment far away, convinced the distance would bring peace. Yet in my dreams, I sometimes hear that faint tapping at the wall again. I keep my curtains closed and the radio on, and the memory of those eyes in the dark remains. Every creak in the night makes my heart jump, and for years after that night, I would have nightmares of faint tapping on the walls. I keep telling myself it was just paranoia, but something inside me knows I am not entirely safe. Even now, I double-check every door and window, and sometimes, on bright sunny days, I look over my shoulder out of habit. In that old flat, I learned the hard way. I'm never truly alone. I moved into the old craftsman house in rural Oregon, thinking I was done with life's surprises. The creaking floorboards and thin walls didn't bother me. Not at first anyway. The rent was impossibly cheap, and the landlord even warned me about the house's history, but I needed the bargain, so I just shrugged it off. I was never the type to believe in ghosts. That first night, a knock came on my bedroom door at exactly 3:17 a.m. A soft tap, followed by a low whisper I couldn't quite make out. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest, completely unsure if I should react or just cry out. After that night, sleep became a distant memory. I was exhausted, twitchy. The whispering returned, and not just at night. It started creeping into my days, like a phantom thought just under my breath. I began noticing more. Shadows would linger in the corners of my vision, and I constantly had the feeling of being watched, even when I was completely alone. Doors creaked open and then shut on their own. One night, I left the radio on just to drown out the oppressive silence. The static crackled, throwing fragments of words I couldn't grasp into the darkness. For a fleeting moment, I even thought I heard my name whispered by the wind. I would lie motionless on the bed, just waiting for something else to happen. Once, as I crept up the stairs, I felt a cold breath on the back of my neck. The silence that followed was deafening, as if the house itself was holding its breath. Every hair on my arm stood on end as I reached the landing. I had to know more. During daylight hours, I scoured the internet and the local library for the house's history. I found an old newspaper clipping from 1923. A family had vanished from this very house, without a trace. The mother, Miriam Whitlock, was said to have summoned something dark during a seance she held in the attic. She supposedly lost her mind after her children disappeared, and the town branded her a witch. People whispered that the house was cursed, that whatever she'd called upon remained trapped inside its walls. One article even mentioned scratch marks on the attic door, as though something desperate had tried to claw its way out. That night, I set up my phone to record video in the living room and bedroom. When I reviewed the footage the next afternoon, a deep chill crawled down my spine. In one clip, the living room was empty, but then a faint silhouette drifted by the doorway. It moved jerkily, like a marionette, with its strings cut. The camera's static noise seemed to spill into a whisper. Miriam. My chest tightened as I replayed the footage, realizing the figure moved just as the old articles described Miriam's frantic state. Later, I saw something else in the video, teeny muddy footprints appearing on the dust-covered floor. I paused the tape. There they were, dirty little feet that were definitely not mine. On the sixth night, it became undeniable. Something wanted, and I woke from a nightmare to find my bedroom shrouded in gloom. A tall figure was hunched at the foot of my bed, impossibly tall with limbs that were far too long. The thing's head cocked unnaturally, as if it were sniffing the air. I fumbled for my flashlight and hid its face. It was pale and gaunt, with deep hollow eyes and lips peeled back in a cruel, sharp grin. I felt its hunger like acid in my gut. Before I could even scream, it was gone, vanished into the darkness with a wheezing animal sigh. By now, I was barely sleeping at all. I boarded up the windows and carved a single warning into the hallway wall. Do not trust IT at dusk. The phone and internet would always die, as if cut off by unseen hands. One morning, I came out to find the hallway mirror shattered like a dirty handprint smeared across the shards. My friends stopped answering my calls. I started keeping my keys and flashlight under my pillow, with a kitchen knife on the bedside table. Every strange noise sent a fresh jolt of adrenaline through my veins. I was living on caffeine fear, no longer knowing who or what I could trust. 3 weeks in, it happened. I woke to the sound of the front door slowly creaking open. Cold air licked through the cracks. Muddy footprints marked the wooden floor, trailing directly to my bedroom door. I squeezed my eyes shut, my heart hammering in my throat, and opened them to a living nightmare. There it stood in the doorway, a figure tall and thin, with skin like ash, holding something. In its arms was a little girl, a ghost huddled and trembling, her eyes wide and haunted. She looked right at me, her small face smudged with dark dirt and tears, and she whispered a name, Rebecca. Then she lifted a trembling finger and pointed to the demon standing right behind her. I forced myself to move, stepping back as the creature lowered its head. It had pale, peeling skin and long, crooked nails that clicked on the wood floor. The stench of rot and sulfur filled the air. It sniffed again, and I could feel its hunger, hear a low growl deep in its throat. My lungs burned as I turned to run. The child's wail echoed behind me, and I could have sworn her ghostly fingers brushed my hand as I fled. I bolted from the room. Behind me came the sound of something heavy thudding on the stairs. I ran down the hall, every floorboard groaning under the demon's weight. At the last second, I threw myself through the front door and out into the stormy morning. The rain smacked my face as if trying to wash away the nightmare. I jumped into my car, hands trembling on the wheel, and didn't hesitate. The sky flashed with a distant thunderclap. In my rearview mirror, I thought I saw a dark shape at the upstairs window, the demoness, glowing eyes watching me leave. The next flash came too late, to be sure. For one terrifying moment, I nearly hit the brakes, but instinct screamed at me to keep going. I just drove. My legs trembled on the pedals as the house grew smaller behind me, the storm swallowing the road. I haven't gone back to retrieve anything. The local paper called it vandalism by squatters, but I know better. Something evil lives in that house, a demon born of a mother's grief and a trapped child I couldn't save. Every night now, in my new apartment, I hear faint tapping on the walls and distant whispers just outside my door. Sometimes I wake up thinking I see the little girl's face at the window, pale and pleading. I keep a lamp on next to my bed, just watching the shadows grow longer. My blood runs cold, knowing that some things never, ever leave. And now, every night, I sleep with one eye open, especially at 3:17, half expecting it to come for me. I haven't slept a full night since. Thanks for watching. If you have a story like this, share it in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more.